Again. Thank you for joining us for our GradTeach Live information session. We're so pleased and happy that you are interested in taking part or potentially taking part in what we think is a very exciting initiative for us in the graduate school. So just as a way of introductions, my name is Ashley Sorrell, and I am the Assistant Director of Graduate Student Professional Enhancement. And I am here with three of my other colleagues. So I'll go ahead and start with Morris and let him introduce himself.
Hi everyone, it's good to see you. I'm Morris Grubbs, Assistant Dean in the Graduate School and Director of Professional Enhancement. I'll turn it to Chad.
Hi everybody, I'm Chad Gilpin. I'm the Program Manager in Graduate Student Professional Enhancement. A lot of your names look familiar, so that's great.
Yeah. Amanda?
Sure. Hi, I'm Amanda Sloan. So I'm a communications assistant for the graduate school, and I'm also a fellow graduate student. So hi.
Just as an overview of this session, we are going to start with some general information, overview tips on participating in GradTeach Live, and then we're going to turn it to two panelists who we are happy to join us. I'll introduce them a little bit later in this session, but they are winners of GradTeach Live, so they're going to offer their advice and tips as well. So give me a minute to share my screen, and Morris will tell us about the origins of GradTeach Live.
Sure, just a little context to sort of set the stage. GradTeach Live developed out of Grad Research Live, which is our way of talking about the 3-minute thesis. So the 3MT started at the University of Queensland way back in 2008 and sort of took the world by storm, mainly because it's an attempt to take what's going on in the academy outside the walls of the academy and communicate it, communicate clearly and engagingly about all the research that's going on that the public may not know about or may be skeptical about, and so forth. So that's one of the reasons why the 3-minute thesis focused on research really took off, is because it had that public communication emphasis to it. So we've had the 3-minute thesis focused on research since about 2011 or 12 or so. And in 2019, we decided, well, we want to try to lift teaching up on par with research as best we can here at a research university, and give it equal billing, give it equal emphasis, because teaching is a critical skill that can help grad students develop a range of skills, from knowing how to motivate individuals to running focused meetings to using backward design effectively and sharing constructive feedback. The list goes on in terms of the kinds of skills that you develop out of your teaching skills. So that's why we developed this. In 2019, we've only had it, what now, Ashley, a couple of times in person? And, and this will be the third time in person. So as far as we know, we're the only university to have a teaching version of the 3-minute thesis. And I'm not expecting it to take off the way the original 3-minute thesis took off, because the audience and the purpose are both a little different. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about the audience in just a minute, but the audience for GradTeach Live is mostly faculty, other TAs, other people on campus. So you're not necessarily imagining that you're speaking to a lay audience like you are in the traditional research-based 3-minute thesis. So that's just a little context and some of the differences between the two competitions. Turn it back to you, Ashley.
Great. So we do want to mention that GradTeach Live does come with a monetary award for first place, second place, third place, and a People's Choice winner. And you can see those award amounts here on the screen. Now, you may be wondering, what is the People's Choice winner? Well, it's our way to encourage you to get your friends and family, colleagues out to the event, because at the end of the event, they will have the opportunity, the audience has an opportunity to vote on who they thought did a good job, who their essential favorite was in the competition. And so based on those poll results, we give the People's Choice Award winner a monetary award as well. So I just want to make you aware that this is a competition with some monetary backing to it. I also want to make you aware just up front of some important dates. So the registration deadline to register your intent to participate actually isn't until March 6th at 8 a.m. Now, registering your intent to participate, this does not require you to upload a preliminary video, because that will be on March 20th at 8 a.m. in which we ask to upload your preliminary presentation. Now, what is going to be different here is that this will be a recorded presentation you do that you then upload to Qualtrics. Usually folks use Zoom to record their preliminary presentation and to upload it. And so that's kind of what we recommend. You can have your slide in the background and you as a little box on the screen when you do that. Now, I do want to caution, even though the prelims are uploaded virtually, the finals are in person. And so that is in person without speaking aids such as note cards or other teleprompter, or whatever the case may be. So the in-person finals are on April 6th at 5 p.m. And we are actually going to do it this year in the eSports Lounge of the Cornerstone building across from Limestone. And once you upload your preliminary submissions, we have folks and colleagues from the Center of the Enhancement of Learning and Teaching to look at those submissions and kind of determine who can go forward in the GradTeach Live finals. And so we will have finalists notified by March 28th, so that based on any feedback, if there are changes or adjustments you want to make, there is some time to do that as well. And let me pause here to see if anyone has any questions so far. Feel free to chat or unmute. And Chad, can you go ahead and put up the website of GradTeach Live, the web link? So if you want further information or the links to register, Chad's going to put the link up to the site. Okay. Morris, this is back to you.
All right. We're going to talk for a few minutes about the goals and just sort of the purpose to give you some added direction and incentive. And some of what we're going to say in the next 2 or 3 minutes, you'll hear echoed in the panel discussion too. Next slide, please. So if you think about some of the challenges of teaching, one of the great challenges is how do you turn your content into a compelling story? So really, if you think about it, teaching challenges us to make our content compelling through storytelling. And so part of the challenge of the GradTeach Live event is to try to figure out how do you make the description of some aspect of your teaching philosophy compelling to an audience. How do you make it interesting? How do you make them want to know more and hang on throughout the 3 minutes while you're talking? So that, like you do in the classroom, uh, using storytelling techniques, you're going to do some of that also when you're talking about your teaching philosophy to this audience. Uh, Part of storytelling involves the art of withholding information. I remember back when I was in graduate school, back in the mists of time, I had a brilliant teacher who led seminar discussions, and what he was so good at was leading us to aha moments at the end of class, and he did that by way of not telling us everything and withholding information, key parts along the way. He knew how to do that in very strategic ways to get us to be curious and to get us to try to anticipate sort of where he might be headed. And you can do some of that here. And that's sort of what we mean by, it's much of what we mean actually by the role of storytelling in this. You know, you think about, you shouldn't be afraid to be dramatic uh, in this presentation. You can focus in on, if you think about a story, you know, you focus in on what's surprising, what's exciting about what you do in the classroom, what's difficult, what might be frustrating to you, what's mysterious in the process. All of those things have to do with storytelling. And then the second point here is distilling complex topics for a novice audience. This is a little less the case in some ways for this exercise because you can take for granted that this is a higher education audience who knows uh, the sort of the challenges of teaching, but still you're distilling down in the same way that you're distilling your own content when you do your teaching in the classroom or the lab. You're also distilling your teaching philosophy in making sure that that's conveyed clearly and engagingly to this audience of other faculty, peer TAs, and so forth. And this leads to the last point here, and that is emotional intelligence, or I would say here probably the capacity for empathy, to be able to sort of project yourself as best you can into the audience's perspective, so you know what they don't know about what it is you're talking about, and so you can bridge that gap. So you have to figure out what's the common ground between what I'm talking about here and what my audience may know and be interested in, and how do I bridge that gap. So those are just a few of the ideas that you need to keep in mind as you're constructing this script of 3 minutes or so. And again, you'll hear more about some of these things in just a few minutes with our two panelists. Next slide. Turn it back to you, Ashley. Ashley, you're muted.
You think I would know by now. So the next three goals that I'm going to go through are three goals that are essentially aligned with our evaluation criteria or rubrics that the judges will be using when watching your presentation. The first one is the communication and articulation of your teaching philosophy, or the aspect of your philosophy that you have chosen to highlight. So again, this is about teaching being a communicative art. So how you clearly communicate these elements, but also how that philosophy for you, how you feel it advances learning in your classroom. And essentially in doing so, you're articulating the value of that particular teaching philosophy. Second goal is you want to show that teaching philosophy in practice by illustrating a specific and engaging classroom example. So we're going to hear from our panelists, and we're building up great anticipation for this panel. I feel like we're going to hear from our panelists about how they chose the example they used to illustrate their philosophy, and also like how you relate that back to the aspect of your philosophy that you're highlighting. In doing so, you just want to be careful to kind of avoid disciplinary or educational jargon. Again, as Morris says, we are in a space where most folks will be familiar with many of the terms that we're using or that you're using. But if there is something that is very niche to your discipline, just being mindful to take a moment to define that. And essentially, you're just wanting to inspire curiosity among the audience to know more about your teaching. And the third goal is effective communication. So showing your enthusiasm for teaching. I think the fact that you all are here, that you're interested in taking part in this event already speaks to that you are dedicated teachers who are enthusiastic about what you do. But then there are some other basic communication or presentation principles about your stage presence in person, pacing, eye contact, and your level of confidence as you do your presentation. Now, something to pay particular attention to is that you're spending time on the philosophy and the example. So, spending adequate time to upfront to explain or discuss what this core tenet of your philosophy might be, and then bringing in the example would be one way you could do that. It's not the only way to do that, but making sure you're kind of hitting on both components and showing how they relate to one another. Now, pay close attention to this one. We do require one slide, and the slide has to be a static slide, so there can't be any type of animation or transitions on the slide. And I know this can be difficult to think about how to represent your teaching in this example in one slide. But we have run into problems in the past with technology not really working with everyone's files and set animations. And so one static slide will be the requirement. So just thinking of a really engaging way to grab the audience through the slide, images, photos, etc. But just make sure it's not transitioning within the slide or there aren't any type of swipe in animations at all. Okay. All right, now we're to our panel already. So I want to introduce our panelists. We have Janelle McConnell Parsons, and you actually saw her image on the first slide we had. She was our winner of our inaugural GradTeach Live event, and she is a PhD candidate in the Department of English and also serves as a graduate TA in the Center for the Enhancement of Learning and Teaching. So second, we have Kelly Grenade. Did I say that right, Kelly? I feel like I always say it wrong. Okay. And Kelly is the winner of our second GradTeach Live competition in 2021. And she is in, have you defended yet? Should I be calling you doctor?
No, not doctor. That's this summer.
Okay. She is a PhD candidate in the Department of Political Science. So we're going to hear from Kelly and Janelle and their experiences and advice in GradTeach Live. So thank you, Kelly and Janelle, for joining us today. I first want to ask, what motivated you to take part in this event? And Janelle, we can start with you.
Cash prizes.
So cash money, yeah. I mean, there's a reason why we offer it.
But really though, teaching is all the teaching work we do as grad students is wildly underpaid and undervalued. And yeah, when there's cash prizes for something like this, go get it. It's not the only reason, but I think it does mean a lot that there's actual like monetary prizes attached to this. For me, it was also a way to start. I knew that like being able to articulate a teaching philosophy was really important for the work I wanted to do going forward, right? So like, yeah, cash prizes, like not a joke, like really, but also being able to kind of have a elevator pitch for like the kind of teaching I do and value was just personally important to me for my professional goals. And I assume, people who are thinking about doing this, like that's probably something that's important to you too.
Great. Kelly, was it the money?
So I would echo some of that, but I would more emphasize that this idea of having the elevator pitch, having that moment to really like reflect on your teaching philosophy and get it to be that condensed into 3 minutes and have that much of an example ready to go. What aspect you want to highlight? I was like, oh, this will be helpful on the job market. Now, the fact that there was cash prize actually felt like then I was having the ability to justify that time being spent, because it is 3 minutes, but it's a lot of prep work to get into that. And so that definitely felt like, this is reward for possibly taking this time. But I think my real reason though that's to get into this is I actually wanted to do 3-minute thesis. Like I knew I was going to do that. Like coming into UK, I was like, that's what I'm going to do. Obviously I missed that entire opportunity because I was on the job market this fall and did not have 3 minutes to spare. But one thing that I was told from Julie Book, actually, when I was starting to go to UK, is she's like, what you need before you graduate and are on the job market is to have a teaching award. And so it was like I did this in my second year and I did not anticipate winning my second year. I thought, okay, I'll just do this every year for 4 years. So we'll see if I can eventually like get this award. And so I thought it sounded like fun. I'm a theater kid. And so, yeah, money, possible award status, that ability to reflect on your teaching philosophy and just having fun, I guess, were the kind of reasons behind there.
Great. Thank you both. So let's go to the process of preparing for GradTeach Live. I want to start with, if you could talk about the process of deciding the aspect of your philosophy that you chose to highlight and the related example you chose to illustrate that aspect. Because teaching philosophies, they're broad. There isn't like one thing we do in the classroom. So how did you kind of focus in on what you really wanted to create a story around? Kelly or Janelle?
I think that I kind of worked backwards.
Okay.
I picked what I felt like was a really exciting student project that came out of the class I had been teaching. And I kind of, I thought to myself, because you're always trying to do so many things in the classroom, right? And so for me, it was like, okay, this is a cool project, but like, why? What do I actually think my students got out of this and how? Like, what specifically is exciting about it? And I worked backward that way to think, okay, well, what I am most valuing and trying to do with this project is X, but I started with looking at the example to get there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, yeah, I did have notes that I can prove that I thought those same things ahead of time.
You still have them.
I would just echo everything that you've just said. It is a bunch of reverse engineering. Some more things, though, that I think I would specify with this is like, yeah, we do try lots of things in the classroom. Some things work, some things don't. And so I had, in my philosophy, always explained like this example of teaching game theory through text messaging. And I was originally going to do that as my presentation, but then I realized it didn't translate well to this sort of medium. And so I went back to the drawing board and I thought, okay, what assignments do I like versus what are my students excited by? And the ones that my students were actually excited by, I thought, okay, that's what I need to be talking about, and reverse engineer why were they excited? What aspect of my teaching philosophy is this like trying to then do? Being on the end of like evaluating people's applications different times, I think the like eye-opening moment there was everybody applying for a job is qualified for that job. We can just assume that. So some people would start off by going, I'm a political science major and I'm applying for this internship. And it was like, that was a wasted first sentence because everybody has that credential. And it's like, if you started off with what you do that's unique, that was a stronger cover letter or whatever. And I think it's the same thing here. Like everybody applying is passionate about teaching. You're a good teacher. So you're going to have the same like baselines that everyone has in common. So then what is like the unique thing that you're doing here that is not just spending the first minute saying, I love teaching. This is like how I am committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like we know if you're good at teaching and care about, that's something you're going to care about. So then I think it's like that aspect of what does that example do that then reverses back into that teaching philosophy, at least. That's how I approached it.
Yeah, and I don't think that's so different in, at least for me, how we think about writing teaching philosophies. I often prompt folks to think about like the best moment they've had in class as a instructor and what was occurring, what was the assignment that day, etc. And so I think starting with an assignment or with the student experience and then kind of growing out from there as far as how it connects to a certain teaching approach is a good way to go about it. If I can go back for a minute, now you can watch Kelly's and Janelle's videos on the website that Chad has posted in the link. I wasn't going to put them through the pain of watching themselves on, on this Zoom. And since I'm not sure if everyone's had a chance to watch your videos or has discovered them yet, can you just explain briefly about what you did your presentations on or your GradTeach Live presentation on?
So for me and y'all, this was like forever ago for me. I'm having to pull up the old
It was pre-COVID.
It was
so
pre-COVID, which
we'll
is
have to
like
give Janelle some grace here.
a whole other era. Oh Lord. But no, I designed a class with the Nunn Center that uses students' work on oral histories. They're publishing them, doing archival research, publishing digital stories. And so I talked about that process and the target, like the public audiences that students are producing for. So thinking not just about like giving students a sense of agency and control and helping them like produce projects that are meaningful and important to them, not just for me, but like doing that through giving them public audiences, right? That it's not just they're turning something in that I'm going to grade, right? And then it goes in the recycling bin. They are turning something in or producing something that gets published in a more meaningful way, like outside the classroom. And so that was the project and the example that I talked about.
And Kelly was in the midst of COVID, so we'll give her some grace too.
So the aspect of my teaching philosophy I was highlighting is that I take a multidisciplinary approach to teaching political science, and I highlighted on them the intersection of art and politics. Art, I was arguing, has multiple access points, and so I gave an example of that students are more willing to discuss political concepts through art, and demonstrated the assignment that I'm actually in the midst of grading for this year, that is using fictional regime and arguing if it's a democracy or autocracy. So like Hunger Games, the Earth Kingdom in Avatar Last Airbender, things like that. And so I gave that as my prime example and spent the bulk of my time for examples on that, and then alluded to two others that also use art to show like this is a philosophy that like carries across the assignments in my classroom.
Great. Thank you both for going back and just sharing, just to give folks in the room some context. So as you crafted that story, based on the decisions you made on what you're going to focus on, can you walk us through this process of how you did so for the GradTeach Live competition? So how did you even start crafting like what you were going to say?
If it's more recent for me, I can start. So I actually only went through, I think it was 3 drafts in the end. Once I had the idea of what aspect I wanted to highlight, I kind of started by writing that out and then kind of going towards the other sides of filling in. I immediately knew, which I apologize. I think I'm the person who has you not able to use animations anymore, but I only had 1 click in the whole thing.
You're not actually.
But I was really, I love the element of time in this. And so I knew that I wanted to have 12 different icons that I was using. So I knew I wanted to have 12 different areas of points that I would hit at different times. And so I started to break down, like I had the 12 bullet points and thought, okay, what do I want to talk about and for how long? And so my speech ended up being 545 words to get out in 3 minutes. I'm a fast talker. I know that I'm a fast talker. And so I had to think about what pace I wanted to go at so that the audience could understand me. And also there wasn't so much going on in the slide behind me. So I find it very distracting if something I'm supposed to like understand something visually when someone is speaking at the rate that I was going with. And so I did make the conscious decision of I wanted less of a visual and more words versus putting a more intense background and speaking slower. One of the main challenges I had in writing that script is that when I put in jargon, it was so helpful for me and I could slow down a little bit because I didn't have to put in so many other words. I could just use what I thought was common knowledge. However, between the grad classes that I took for education and political science, when I went and gave it to my family who, all college educated, but they were like, we don't like this speech. It's not accessible to us with all the jargon that was in there. They're very honest people. But anyhow, I then went back, took out every line of jargon that I could find in there, redid it, and then went to my advisor who was then helpful and also thinking about ways of cutting out some of that jargon. But otherwise, in terms of breaking down the speech, I truly just did a research paper. So I had the problem that I was trying to get people understanding what the problem was. 60% of college students don't want to talk about politics in the classroom. I supported that issue with then the research about it, explained my teaching philosophy or theory, talked about how I would do that in practice, so my methods, and then the outcomes. I also gave concessions, like when this doesn't work or what challenges they're having. So very much that research kind of paper structure, just in 3 minutes and 500. It's like a 500 word abstract then essentially to do. So yeah, that's I think the process.
Very helpful. Thank you, Kelly. Janelle, can you recall how you created your story?
Well, what I'm hearing from Kelly is you need some people who are going to be brutally honest with you, tell you what they don't like. But I mean, really though, I know that was part of the process for me was once I kind of had it prepared, was practicing again and again with people. And really, you do need people who will say, yeah, no, that sentence was pointless, cut it, because there is so little time. And I had more time than Kelly had and y'all have today. I had 5 minutes and 3 slides, 3 minutes, 1 slide. That's so fast, y'all. That's really so fast. So yeah, there really can't be anything extra, and it does really help to have, I think, other people tell you that. I kind of approached crafting it, I think, the same way I usually approach crafting new lesson plans for class, which for me is I start with the slides. So I started, okay, I only have so many slides or whatever, what do I need on it? That kind of helps me start to mentally bucket out, okay, here are my sections. And from there, I had an outline with, I'm looking at it now, it had 3 sections. So I kind of mentally know here's the 3 key ideas I have to target. It's the same way, that I think I also outlined for the DIS chapters I'm working on right now, right? I need my headers. I rely on the big bolded headers. And so I've got those and the key points that I wanted to make after that. I don't know. I don't know that I did mine memorized word for word. I kind of mentally had like, here's my
Mm.
big bold headings that I have to hit. And I just practiced it enough that I knew how long it took me to talk through it. So I'm not sure that I had every word scripted in the same way. I had an outline that supported me in just verbally practicing it again and again until I knew I was hitting the right amount of time.
So I think you all have both kind of touched on my next question, which was about how you prepared leading up to finals. But an interesting difference here with the two panelists is Janelle, you did it in person. And because Kelly did it in the midst of COVID, you did it virtually. And I'm wondering, Janelle, what did you prepare for as far as the in-person component? Did you practice your movements, your pacing, any type of those components of the presentation?
I practiced in person with other people. I practiced in person. I made Katie Coles in the room listen to me a million times. I'm sure she painfully remembers this. But yeah, I did it the same way. So in our department, our kind of qualifying exams are also verbal, and it has to be memorized. Like, you don't have a script up there with you. And so it was very similar to me for preparing for that, like with a cohort in the room. You run through it again and again. And yeah, you practice moving around, you practice the specific kind of like places where you want to stop, pause, inflect on like a particular word or phrase. And yeah, so in person preparing with like an actual audience of people who will be honest and who will hype you up, but also tell you, no, cut that or change that. Or, you need to like pause for a moment there. I think that is definitely, I think that part is key.
Great. And Kelly, so they will be submitting, participants will be submitting their presentations digitally, where they're going to be recording themselves on Zoom. And I'm really curious, actually, because I don't think I've ever asked you this, how did you prepare leading up to the virtual presentation? And if I can just get your opinion on, did you find the virtual presentation, at least do you think it was more intimidating or less so than if you had done it in person?
I remember going out to my living room near tears saying, I wish that this were in person, because then I could be less critical of this tape, because I felt like, because I was saying, this is my best, I think this is the best presentation I could give, it had to be, versus if I were in person, it was like, I could remember it however I wanted to. And that was fine. So some things that I realized when I was prepping it, I actually am wearing heels in it, because how I needed the setup to be for where I wanted the bookshelf to look, I needed it to be like a certain, my level of height, how I could build up the books that my laptop was on. It also helped me to like feel like I was teaching by actually wearing like shoes that I would have worn. So I think it worked out both ways. But otherwise, my main thing that I did, I think, was to know at which seconds I needed to be at what words. And so a lot of times I would get to like 145 and I'd be like, that is not where I want to be. And so I'd start over again. But yeah, when you're recording yourself, you just trip over your words in new ways that you didn't know was possible. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I breathed wrong. Oh, I didn't move. And like, if you go and watch my YouTube video, you're not going to be like, oh, wow, that's an amazing thing. Because it's not. But it was just like, there was a lot of pressure I felt because I was recording. I was like, I slurred that word. I breathed wrong. I moved my hand strangely. I look like that. Yeah, I don't know. It was honestly horrendous. And I do want to say, there is an idea that for every minute of a like staged choreographed battle, so like Star Wars or anything, any minute that you see, there's 3 hours that go into prep. I think that is accurate with this. I feel like it was like, 9 hours for 3 minutes of presentation. But if you get money from it, 700, that's a pretty good hourly rate there.
Great, thank you. I agree, Janelle. I think it would be harder. You're not, because again, I'm recalling teaching on Zoom, you're not getting any sort of audience feedback at all to help drive your presentation. So yeah, good job, Kelly. And your video was great. So harsh on yourself. Okay, so my final question for you all today before I turn it over to any questions from the folks in the room. Looking back, what would you say you gained from participating in GradTeach Live, other than the money that now would allow you to buy a carton of eggs?
I think for me, for me, this was the first time that I really had the chance to articulate a quick, clear, concise teaching philosophy in a public way. And it has been really helpful for me since in kind of thinking about moving my teaching forward, being able to publish on the teaching work that I've done. I've gotten multiple teaching publications since then. And I actually do think that was in no small part to the mental process and exercise of both mentally, but then also verbally and publicly articulating a teaching statement. The stuff that I presented at GradTeach Live, I've taken to a lot of conferences, and not just me. There's a team that teaches the class that I was talking about, and all of us on that team have taken things to conferences. We've gotten invited. We've done invited talks at other universities on this project. So it was really a good gateway for me, and to be able to do lots of both public speaking and publishing on the teaching that I do. And this was kind of the first entry point into that. I will also say that I think one other kind of unexpected, seemingly small, but valuable benefit from GradTeach Live was the having that video and being able to embed that link in my CV or use it for other awards and things has been unexpectedly helpful. I was just at something last week. I had won an award for teaching, and I was there giving a talk, and I was talking to the committee who had chosen it, and I realized that they had actually clicked on the link on my CV and watched it, and were talking to me about the teaching that I had presented at GradTeach Live. And I was like, oh, interesting. I didn't really know if people clicked on those kinds of things, but just having that actual professional video of me on a stage talking and presenting, and having it be something short and accessible to actually use has been also an unexpected benefit. It's just nice to have. That's all. It's nice to have.
Yeah. And I would echo that entirely. Same thing. It's publications have come out of this. A lot of confidence has come out of just having this language up your sleeve, to be able to talk at either conferences, interviews, or just even in your other grad classes when you start to work on papers about pedagogy. I've said that this was one of the highlights of my college career, or graduate career. It was just such a moment during COVID that it was we were all home, that we weren't really seeing our departments. And I remember just going to this and meeting another community of people who also cared about teaching. It was just this really wonderful thing. Recording it alone in my room, not so much, but the actual GradTeach Live presentation was really, really fun. And I felt like I kind of got some recognition and street cred within my own department as well, because it was something I went out and did. They didn't even know I was participating in. And so getting, if you can, have it as a participation or an award, it does help with, I think, also other things I applied for on UK campus. When I went for other teaching awards, I was able to use that as a credential and show like I'm serious, I'm taking part in stuff that the graduate school is doing, I'm active in wanting to get better, and here's something that the graduate school as well as my peers are like evaluating. And so yeah, but otherwise you get that practice for the job market and everything that Janelle was saying. And I will say, because it wasn't something that I had budgeted for in winning this award, I was able to tuck the money aside. And I mean, this fall, I'm planning to use it to decorate my tenure track office, which is like, I feel like the most exciting thing to do with all of it. But it's just a great experience. And I tell everyone they should do it.
It's amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, so I will open it up to the participants in the room. If you have any questions for our panelists or even for myself and my colleagues about GradTeach Live, we are happy to field those as they come. Feel free to chat them or unmute, whatever you're comfortable with.
Hi, well, Janelle and Kelly, thank you for sharing your experiences with us and telling about everything that went into your presentations. I'm realizing that this question might not be as I don't know, not as helpful, maybe not as easy for like the rest of us to translate into practice, because the rules have changed so much, like too, since you presented. But I would love to hear you talk more about the work that went into the slides. I'm realizing that now we have only one slide, which on the one hand makes things like easier, but on the other hand, it ups the stakes too. Like, what are you actually going to put there? Bullet points, images. So like, what was your process when you were designing the slides?
So go ahead.
Can I, I'm not going to ask, I'm just going to drop my slides in the chat. If I was turning these 3 into one slide, then I would have, I probably would have cut actually the last one. I would have kept the middle example, and I would have split the slide in half, right? So like the first slide that's like agency and target public audience, I think I would have had that on the left side, like here's my teaching philosophy, agency, but we do it through target public audience, other side example. I think to me, it was important for me to really highlight like the student example, right? And I think Kelly talked about this too, like what is it that gets students excited? Like start there, that's probably like a good thing to talk about. So it was important for me to have like the student workup. So I don't know, I'm sure that's not the only way to do it. If I was doing one slide though, on one half, right? Like keep it simple. Here's what I want you to remember about like the philosophy I'm talking about. Other side, here's the example we're using to illustrate that. Like the 2 key things like you want your audience to remember. I don't know.
Janelle, would you mind giving Google access to those?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing those.
I think for mine, because I was thinking I might have just turned it into like the static slide where it's just all the colors in the very last like moment that you see on mine. But I think something that I had contemplated back when I was doing it was to just have a single image. And so if I were to like encapsulate this in one thing, I think I would probably choose like a scene from the Hunger Games where it's like very much an authoritarian like peacekeeper is like beating down a citizen or something. So it's something that would look like it was politics, but then I would probably draw the line more clearly that like on the screen you see what we would consider an authoritarian government, but this is actually taken from a fictitious film. What does fiction teaches about politics, and then go into it. So I think I would have like switched a line or two and probably just had one image, because again, I do think that the more complicated your background is, the less complicated your speech needs to be, or slower, so that people can like read. Like if you have words on it and people have to read it, I feel like you either have to say that at some point and like address what's on the slide, or I prefer just have, here's an image to be thinking about while I give you a lot of words. So I think I would have just probably gone with like a Hunger Games scene or still.
This is also where an audience to practice with, I think, is important though, right? Like I really do think like if you do nothing else, if you listen to nothing else, Kelly and I said, like do it your own way, but like get a audience to like listen to you and look at your slides and be honest and help you edit them.
That's
It-
very helpful.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Daria.
Oh, no, you go ahead. I was going to sanction up into another question.
I keep getting crash reports, so I'm sorry if I'm cutting out. Ray Celeste, I saw your yeah, answering it. It should be in widescreen. So
Wide ring. Oh, are you back, Chad?
I think so. I have no idea what's going on.
You are back. Can you explain? Is it 16:9?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I think Ray Celeste was asking, are Google Slides and PowerPoint's widescreen ratio different? Is that what you're saying, Ray Celeste? I just assumed that they were the same.
Sorry, so Google Slides has a 4:3 ratio, or it has a 16:9 ratio. PowerPoint has a 4:3 ratio, at least
Okay.
most PowerPoint. I guess I don't really use PowerPoint that much, but I was just wondering, because if it's in the wrong one, it'll be stretched out.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Or-
I should have addressed that. I just assumed that both of their widescreen ratios were pretty close to the same. So I think I'll put all these together in PowerPoint. So it would probably be best to use the PowerPoint ratio, and I will,
Okay.
I'll publish that to the site somewhere or something so other people are aware.
Awesome, thank you.
Daria, did you have another question for the panels?
I sure did. I know that I personally hate this question, so I apologize for asking it, but I have to. Are there any things that you would have done differently, either with your prep or with your presentation itself, like looking back at it?
I'm only taking it from, I think, the job market angle that like I did my original thing now 2 years ago, and I have developed my teaching philosophy since then. And so I kind of cringe at the like obvious things to me now that I didn't include in it. And it's more just the philosophy end of the whole art journey. Yeah, because I don't think that there's anything. I feel like the example I still stand by. I think that was the best one that I could have done in that moment. But I, at the end, like talk about an airplane paperback, which were words I could not get out of my mouth more times than not giving that speech. And I think I would have just cut that whole like end instead, and I put more in the philosophy at the beginning, because I think that the philosophy honestly is weak in hindsight, and I would focus more on how that approach of an interdisciplinary study benefits students from different diverse backgrounds, and give a bit more into the connection between those two. And I just failed to do that until 2 years later. Somebody asked, how does your teaching philosophy relate to commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? I'm like, oh, this is how. So I think if you can tie that in earlier, that's something we care so much about in education. Thinking through that earlier just helps.
I don't know. I do hate this question, Dasha, so thanks for asking it. You know, all I can really
Sorry.
answer, yeah, you should be. All I can really think as an answer to that is I do remember being like nervous about hitting the time, and I keep saying like practice in front of people, and I did, but also like we're busy. And I remember going into the competition thinking, I wish I had practiced more, like I'm looking at my outline trying to like remember and have it in mind. So I don't know, I Just, I'm going to say it a 10th time, like just the more you can practice it and feel confident going in that you've practiced it 10 million times, like, and you've got it. I don't know. That's all I can think of to answer that.
Can I respond to that? Because I think as somebody who then felt like I practiced too much and felt so guilty that I wasn't spending then time on something else in grad school, it paid off years down the road. And so I originally like went, oh, I wasted an entire weekend recording this video because I, have issues. And but it was like 3 years later, it's like, this is still something that has benefited me. And I did not see that as paying it forward. I thought it was just like, oh, if I don't win money, this was a complete waste of time. It is not. It is truly like having this amount of time to focus on condensing your teaching philosophy is time we do not get at a research institution. So it is really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think regardless of win or lose, you've gone through the mental process. You have the video now that you can use in the future. You have a very short, quick elevator pitch articulated of your teaching philosophy. Like, if you are going to commit, in other words, like any time to this, like just go full in. Like if you have decided like this matters for you and your professional goals, whatever those are, tenure track or otherwise, then commit to it and don't feel bad about spending a lot of time on it. It took more time than I thought it would, right? And I didn't have quite as much time carved out as I wish I had, maybe, to feel confident and like I was gonna nail it. But like, I know it's hard to commit the time, but like if this is like one of the things you're going to choose to put your time towards, then just go for it. Know it's going to take a lot of time, or a bit of time, and don't feel bad about that. Like, if it matters to you, then do it.
I have a quick question, and I know we're short on time, but just thinking about the choices that you make when you're drafting the script, thinking about telling your story, how do you know what to start with? I mean, what are those first few sentences? How do you make that decision? And then how do you close? How do you close out of the story? Do you have any suggestions about the opening and closing?
So I opened with, today I'm going to talk to you about politics, just because that is like a line that I've always known just gets people, when they hear you're political scientist, like, oh, and like an immediate, they want to talk to you about really contentious things, and it's like, or not talk to you at all. And so I wanted to build on like that assumption that it wasn't just, I knew that no matter who was in my audience, they would not want to talk about politics. And so like that level of like relating to my audience was where I wanted to start. So I think any opening that is like, oh, this speech is for everybody here and relates to me, would be great. I really struggled with the conclusion. It is a line from my teaching philosophy, which is like having curious, creative thinkers. You can tell how many times I practiced speech that's 3 years later and still in there. Like that is a line from my teaching philosophy. And I brought it in because it's really early on in the philosophy. And I was like, I want to remind and end with that. And I know that was not so clearly drawn in my, it's almost a new idea at the end, which is kind of bad. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I think I would have taken away one of the very last points I made at the end and made my teaching philosophy longer. So I could have had that main point that I wanted to make at the end clearer at the beginning to summarize. But yeah.
Let's see. I started with a problem. I started with, before I even got to like what it is I'm trying to do. I teach first year required writing courses. My students don't want to be in there, right? Like, and I don't blame them. I didn't want to be when I was a freshman in college either. Like, they come in focused on like what I want them to do. They want to get the grade. This is not their major. But that's the problem. That's not how I want my classes to work. Here's what I'm trying to do instead. Like, I want them to take like some control and get excited about what they're researching and writing. I want them to have agency as researchers, because like that's what's going to carry them through the rest of their time at UK. So I started with that problem, right? And narrating that and use that to transition into then, why that's my teaching philosophy for these kinds of classes, these kinds of students. My conclusion, it was short, right? Like, it's the thing you want people to remember, so you want to keep it short and to the point. And I think like big picture, right? Like you're using this very specific example from your class, but like, why does that matter big picture, right? Like, what do you want your students to actually take from that? And you know, if you believe in the teaching you're doing, and you do, because you're here to do grad teach live, like you do think that it has big impacts. So like, don't, you know, I think don't be scared to end in that way, like making a big claim for what you see your teaching actually doing. Like you're doing really good hard work in your classroom. Hopefully that is doing big things for your students. So I don't know, make that big claim at the end.
Thank you all.
I think that's a good note to end on. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. And thank you so much to Kelly and Janelle for taking their time out of their busy schedules to join us today and provide some invaluable advice. Mic drop moment at the end, yes. So if you have additional questions, we'll kind of linger around after the meeting, or you could email me. I'll put my email in real quick. Or Chad, and I'll put his in real quick. And we hope to see you all, or see your submission, see your intent to participate, and see you all at the finals as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.